Hi, we are going to talk about 5 essential business processes that every business needs, and that even as a small business solo operator, you can implement very quickly to make your business more consistent and more efficient so you can achieve the goals that you have set out for yourself. So, I'm going to talk for the next few minutes about marketing systems simplified. And I'm going to talk about them in terms of the manual thing you're trying to do. And I will just simply say that all of this can be automated to be more not to offload from yourself the ability or the responsibility to communicate with your prospects and your customers, but for the purpose of being efficient with your time in communicating with your prospects and with your customers. So we're going to talk about it in terms of what the processes are, not in terms of the technology of how you automate it, because the point is you can do all of this manually text messaging. Your thumbs just have a limited amount of how fast they can go on any given day. And so what the systems do, what the automations do, is replicate what you would do manually with software, with a platform. I have a particular platform that I generally use when I'm trying to help someone. But I'm also platform agnostic enough that if they're already using a particular platform and they are trying to do these processes and need help figuring out the right way to use the software that they're using, I'm totally willing to be an assistant in that process of building out the way to do these processes in whatever system the person happens to use. Okay, so my business is bulk guy marketing. Subtle, I realize. And what I do is I help small businesses with their training and with their technology for implementing marketing tactics. I am a former Army Aviator, and for the last third of my Army career, I worked in 2-star and 3-star general headquarters, helping run planning teams and operations centers, solving very complex geopolitical problems. I'm going to tell a little bit of a story because it describes who I am. So I was stationed at Joint Base Lewis and McChord in Washington State, South Puget Sound, and on the First Corps staff, working for a 3-star general. And I was assigned as the plans team lead for an exercise of what's going to happen a year and a half later in Alaska. Meanwhile, on the exact same timeline was another exercise happening in Japan, and the person assigned as the team leader was 5 years younger than me and a whole rank lower than me. But he was much more politically savvy, much more nuanced in his communication styles, and thus he got the higher prestige plans team job because he was more emotionally suited to serve in that way. So I go to because I'm dealing with primarily US and just a handful of other nations of people that I'm working with. And they're mostly Army, a few Air Force, and a couple of Navy planners. And I can get away with being a little bit abrupt with people. And I go to the first planning conference, and as the official representative of the 3-star general whose exercise this falls under, authority this exercise falls under, I have a formal portion of the briefing saying, this is General Lanza's priorities. This is his guidance. This is his instructions. And for the rest of the conference, I'm kind of just floating in the background listening to what's going on. In the middle planning conference, I have another portion. I stand up and just one slide briefing. Hey, so reiterating the planning guidance, here we go. And as we get to the start of the third planning conference, I realized that one of the U.S. colonels that's sitting at the front table has shifted the prioritization of the exercise. So it's prioritizing his team's opportunities to the expense of all the other colonels, the Air Force and the Air Force community, the Air Force group, and all of the other Army colonels. And I stand up and I say, "Hey, sir, can I say something?" I get the floor. And I talked for less than 2 minutes. And I said something basically, "Sir, I'd like to reiterate the general's planning guidance." And I sat back down. And the tone in the room changed. And I'm going to pet my dog. And that colonel backed down and made sure that all of his peer colonels also had training opportunities from this exercise. The point is, the guy that was going to be a planning team leader in Japan needed to have finesse. So the Army picked a screwdriver to go work the political and cross-cultural issues in Japan. And they sent me as a hammer to Alaska. And if everything had flowed smoothly, I wouldn't have had anything to do other than my initial briefing on the first conference and then a reiteration on the second conference. But when the hammer was needed, I stood up, I laid the hammer down, even though I was outranked by every single one of the people at that table. And I get back to JBLM, and I come into work on the next Monday morning, and I get a call from my boss, my colonel, says, "Come tell me what happened." Go down to his office, "Sir, so what happened is one colonel was getting off training guidance and prioritizing his own exercise, and I had to reiterate General Lanza's guidance." He says, "Okay, I thought that's what had happened." The grapevine was working. The colonel called the colonel, do what colonels do. He says, "I'll talk to General Lanza about it, and I'll let you know if I need anything." And I never heard anything else about it again. My job now is to help you find the right way to communicate with your audience. And when it requires a screwdriver, when it requires subtlety, I know people that can write and draw. So communicate graphically and communicate in copy well. And what I do is make sure that all of those pieces of communication are sequenced in a way that communicates your message. So, is this you, or is it someone you know? Are you caught in the small business chaos? You're working hard, trying to break through the threshold. You're out of the feast or famine and into the stage of business where you have profitability and stable growth instead of the constant turbulence of the hamster wheel, feast or famine. Is that you, or is it someone you know? And if you answered yes, then here's probably why. You are an expert in your craft, whatever it is you do, whether it's roofing, whether it's lawn care, whether it's restaurant, whether it's graphic design, whether it's seamstressing. But you're wearing too many hats. In fact, there are 21 hats, and you're trying to wear all of them. And there's just not enough time in the day to do your thing, serve your customers, and also do all of these administrative tasks that are required to run your business. Instead, you are overwhelmed by all of the tasks that are required to accomplish, you're required to accomplish on any given day. And how do you get out of this situation? You master the mundane. You do the routine things routinely. So now let's use this piece of white space, but I'm going to have to move this face in here again in a little bit. Most of the things that you need to do, it's obvious what you need to do. This is Alex Hormozy. Dr. Ivan Misner says, success comes from, Dr. Misner is the founder and chief visionary officer for BNI, Business Networking International. And he says, success comes from uncommon application of common knowledge. Most of us know what we need to do. The question is, are we willing to do it, as Hormozy says, and are we willing to do it with uncommon dogged determination, as Dr. Misner would say? And so for this presentation, I can go down the automation rabbit hole, and I can show you technically, step by step, all of the ways we automate all of these processes, or we can, at the macro level, conceptually describe all of these processes that your business needs so that you can continue growing. As Tony Robbins says, we are constantly in growth. We don't stand still. We are constantly moving. The question is, do we choose which direction we move, or do we randomly let life pick our direction for us? So here's the 5 systems that I'm going to talk about. I'm going to talk about missing communications and being responsive any way someone tries to reach out to you. I'm going to talk to you about messaging, and I'm going to use the framework of email marketing, but text messaging, direct messaging on a social media platform, WhatsApp, Telegram, suddenly I'm drawing a blank. Whatever platform you're using, the question is, how are you using it? Are you using it consistently? A CRM in this case means customer relationship management. I come from an aviation background. In that world, CRM is crew resource management. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about customer relationship or contact relationship management. We're talking about automating routine tasks, doing those routine things routinely. And we're talking about customer retention and stimulating referrals through our review and reputation management systems, processes. And then I might talk about social media for just a moment. So, miscommunications. There is a critical time period. We typically talk about it in terms of the fast 5, the first 5 minutes after a customer or prospect decides that they want to engage with us. If we don't have a human being interacting with them within the first 5 minutes, we are likely to lose that sale. And for small business, so the statistics on the screen says 62%. So nearly 2/3 of calls and messages that come into small businesses are never even answered. Or the owner says, I'll return the call tonight, and realistically, the call doesn't get returned until the next day. And by then, the prospect has called 3 other people. So the question is, how do you set up a system that allows you, if you're a home inspector or a plumber and you're in someone's crawl space, how do you have some kind of system in place so that you can respond to that person and say, I'm not available right now, I'll get right back to you? When you're that larger business and you have a full-time staff member, then, well, that becomes a different thing. But for the small business, the reason that the number is so high is because so many small businesses, the owner is one of the, if not the primary, customer service provider. So how quickly you respond is a significant portion of how the customer or the prospect experiences that, how they feel about that interaction. So building that perception, have some kind of automatic voicemail message that responds and says, we will engage with you, we will have a conversation with you, and be sure to have that sequence of follow-up, because if you miss that first opportunity, you don't want to not make the second. All right, so we talked about miscommunications. We're going to talk about mastering your campaigns. There's a challenge with, and we're framing this in terms of email marketing, but text messaging, the same basic concepts apply. The difference is open rates on text messaging is well in excess of 80%, close to 90%. Open rates on email, if you're getting better than 20% email open rates, you're probably doing really well. The challenge is you don't want people to be unsubscribing when they are actually your ideal client. And the concept we're looking for here is comes from Patrick Flynn in Will It Fly, and it's probably not original to him, but that's where I get it from. And it says the riches are in the niches, but the fortune is in the follow-up. So engaging in that first 5 minutes to get the conversation started, and then nurturing that conversation over time. The challenge is balancing engaging often enough without being off-putting. And the message, the feel, the tone of the messaging is critical to this. Thus, the finesse, the nuance of how do you set your messages so that they feel informative without being salesy, pushy, aggressive, and causing this 73% of people unsubscribing because it felt too pushy. So all other things being equal, people buy from those they know, like, and trust. You build authority and competence by providing value in your nurturing email or text message or social media presence messaging. The other way to think about it is unsubscribe is a good thing. As long as you're communicating value and explaining who you serve and how you serve them, and you're not being excessively aggressive, and there's a balancing act to figure out in your particular situation what is too aggressive. Then if you have someone unsubscribe, this is actually meaning that they're helping you know that they're not your target audience. They're not your tribe. They're going to get the same service, but from someone else. Now you no longer have to concern yourself with continuing to nurture that relationship. You can focus on the people who are choosing to stay in your ecosystem. So specifically regarding emails, warming up your domain. So when you have an email address and you just start blasting lots of people with it, you'll get flagged as spam. There are ways we can configure the email to be validated that it belongs to you. There are ways we can validate a business phone number so that we can validate that it belongs to you, to a real business. And then the list hygiene portion is of the people who are on and then warm that up. So don't immediately start blasting 10,000 messages a day. The system will detect that as spam and will block you, and rightfully so. And then list hygiene is the concept of segmenting people who you know are your core target audience, or are your core existing raving fans, versus people who they meet your demographics, but there's no way to know for sure whether they're actually interested. And so segmenting your audience and providing messaging at different tempos for those different audiences is going to help you stay in the inbox for each of them and not get that unsubscribe too early. But don't be spammy. Provide value. Demonstrate that you are an authority in your space. Lead with education rather than a call to action where you're asking for more than you're asking for more in action on the part of the customer and making a purchase than you are in a value that you're building in the relationship. So you're putting information, you're building social credibility with that person. That's the nurturing part. And then eventually you draw out of that bank and say, can I turn this nurtured relationship into an opportunity to provide you a thing that I do at a price? But timing of that ask is crucial to keeping your marketing communications open rates high. You're mastering your tempos of your marketing communications. Okay. Using a CRM. So I've been alluding to this concept of a funnel, and I knew this was here, so I was trying to not use the word. So there's a slight challenge in the community, in the marketing world, because a funnel is also a actual deliverable thing. A landing page with a thank you page with an action and then a thank you page, that series of pages is a funnel on a website. And so people will sometimes talk about a funnel and they are meaning that actual digital piece of digital terrain. But the concept of a sales funnel is more conceptual than that, is more theoretical than that. It's the mental picture of all the people that possibly could buy from you that aren't even aware of you. And then, so how do you make them aware? And then you go through that nurturing sequence to build the know, like, and trust. And only at the bottom of the funnel do you make a close. Do you make a call to action? Do you make a ask for the sale moment? And significantly, you want this funnel to be leaky. You want people to opt out partway through if they realize you're not the if you're not the right provider for them to provide this service. When I was in business, it was an undergraduate business school. We were already talking about this concept of it takes 8 touches for someone to reach a buying decision. Then I spent a significant portion of my life, 24 years active duty in the U.S. Army. And I come back into the business world in well into the 2020s, in 2017, literal, exactly, to be precise. And I'm hearing and I'm seeing people talk about the number of touches it takes to make a buying decision. And I've subsequently seen Google quotes which says the number is somewhere around 12 touches. My intuition says that's probably with large brands. And so maybe my gut that tells me it's 24 touches is probably too high, but somewhere in the range 12 to 18 impressions before that person moves from unaware of you as a product provider to you might be the one who they should be talking to in stage 3 and 4 of this process for them. But the other thing that we need to think about in terms of sales funnels is it looks linear to us as a business owner, but it's not linear to our customer, to our prospect. They have a life to live. And this particular problem they're trying to solve, that is the thing that we're able to help them with, is only one little portion of their life. And so the 18 or 24 or 12 touches that they have with us happen randomly in their world. So what do? We map that journey the linear way that as best we can, but leave space for what happens when that customer randomly finds this YouTube video versus that landing page, this social media post versus that email. And then our audience segmentation and our audience tracking system, our pipeline is the way we'd use it in a CRM, allows us to monitor the stages and change the segmentation, referring back to our messaging mastery, so that we can adapt the message to where the person is now in that journey. And I'll say this about that last bullet, just very briefly. The person most likely to pay you is the person who already has. So continuing the relationship, continuing to nurture that relationship after the first sale is where 80% of the profitability for your business is going to come. Having this person going through this random life circumstances and eventually getting to 12, 15, 18 touches with you, making a purchase decision, that could be a very long sales lead cycle. But once they're comfortable with you as their primary provider, the next sales cycle goes much more quickly. All right, so there we go. We've addressed having a system in place to handle missed messages. We've talked about mastering our routine nurturing messages. We've talked about segmenting our audience and having a pipeline or tracking mechanism to see where our audience is in our process. Now we're going to talk about automating some of the repetitive tasks that you might have in your normal day-to-day operations in your business. Too many people are still, as we're quickly approaching the second quarter of the 21st century, air gapping data between different systems in their data processing methods. So they're getting the information in one place and they're manually typing it in a different place. Or at best, they're copying and pasting multiple fields. When I was with First Corps in Afghanistan, I had a computer workstation that had 3 computer screens for my NATO network. I had my U.S. secret network, and I had internet that you and I know, publicly accessible. And on the wall in front of me, I had 4 screens worth of data being presented. And I didn't have to look for information. All of the information I needed was already on my screen. And it was simply a matter of looking in the right place and answering the question, or answering the question. Looking in the place and answering the question. Most of us don't have that much technology available to us most of the time. But if we're trying to look at that much information about our business and we have only a laptop screen or only a tablet screen, that limits our ability. We have to invest some of our mental capacity in just keeping track of the information. So building yourself a dashboard or using someone's dashboard that already exists so that the information, to the best ability that it is all graphically displayed in front of you, so that you don't have to think about where to get the information, will enable your brain to more quickly process the information. Because all these administrative tasks have to happen, but all of the other 21 hats of the ones that aren't actually serving customers, all of the others are necessary evils. They're required tasks. They can't be not done, but they are a distraction and a diversion from actually doing the business of your business. And very often, paying taxes or taking care of processing payroll, dealing with HR, human resources issues, distract the company owner from serving customers. So what do? Either get an all-in-one software, or use software integrations that take the data from one and use an API, automation processing interface, whatever API stands for. At the same time, your business exists at a place in time and space in its life cycle, and so there's no need to buy a complex software that is enterprise level that serves companies with global reach and massive sales teams when you're a 1-person or a 5-person shop. So match the complexity of the platform you use with the stage of your business cycle. And ideally, you would find one that you can use that is an all-in-one platform that you can just use the poor pieces and parts that work for you now, but can grow with you through at least the initial couple stages of that business growth. Then we're going to talk about customer retention, stimulating referrals, and primarily about reviews reputation. And we're going to focus on the technical part or the theoretical part of reviews. Actually, I'm going to provide you a very specific tactic for responding to reviews. So the story these statistics say is that buying behavior can be directly attributed to the number and frequency of reviews that are on a website or on a Google business profile. And when I say Google, Google owns the space, but Bing and Yelp and all of those others also matter. So when I say Google, I don't mean exclusively Google. I just mean that Google's the big dog in the fight. So the total number of reviews matters, but it's not an absolute number where a business needs X number of reviews in order to be credible. It depends on how old that business is, because if that business is very young and has a lot of reviews, then that would be obviously artificial as well. But it's not just the total number of reviews, it's also the recency. If the most recent review is 5 years old, the customer is left wondering if the business has had a significant downturn and is no longer that effective, or if they're completely out of business. No reviews at all leaves the customer uncertain as to whether the business exists or whether the business has ever done quality work ever. How do you, and then the key thing here is that so the total number of reviews and the recency of the reviews, and did the business owner respond to that review? So ask for the review. When your customer gives the review, thank them, share it. That gives you the social, that leverages the social proof, builds your credibility. And you can ask that reviewer, hey, if you are comfortable, please share that review as well to your social media audience. And that expands your reach to an audience that you couldn't otherwise reach. So how do you deal with positive reviews? I'm giving you a specific tactic at this point. So always be thankful. And here's the theme. Respond to the person who's reading the review, not the person who wrote the review. You're writing to whoever gave you the review. It's addressed, "Thank you, Ernie." But who you're really talking to is the person 2 months, 3 months, 6 months from now who reads the review and your response. So that's the frame that should be in your mind when you're responding to these reviews. So first of all, be grateful and gracious. Reiterate your commitment to your customers and to providing great customer service. Be personably complimentary to the person who gave you the review. Those two things is who now you're saying thank you to Ernie, but you're telling the person who might do business with you that you will be appreciative to them as well. And then have a soft call to action. Do not ignore negative reviews. This is actually a really good opportunity to leverage a experience that happened, a reality, and turn it into a net positive for your business. Now, I'm not talking about invalid reviews. Invalid reviews, we need to go into the dispute process and address the fact that this is an invalid review. But if you have a bona fide true customer who came in, had a negative experience, and leaves you a negative review, again, the way you turn this into a net positive is you acknowledge and thank the person who had the experience. But what you're telling the next person that comes along is that you will work through the process to give them a good experience because you're demonstrating your willingness to do that in the way you respond to this negative review. So first of all, now you have an issue that you need to take responsibility for. Even if they were a major contributing factor, take responsibility for your portion of the problem. I realize we didn't communicate with you as well as we could have, if that was the case. Say thank you because this is a learning opportunity for you, and you don't get to get better if someone doesn't give you negative feedback. You're showing your next customer, the person who reads this review, that you're willing to learn and grow and provide them better service than the situation that happened in this particular case. That's where the commitment to your customer service, you're expressing that, and that gives this other person confidence that you can take care of them as well. And then express appreciation that you received that feedback. You probably said some harsh words under your breath before you actually sat down and typed it. The great thing about automation is you can leverage your emotion. You can put your emotions aside and let the automation do this for you. But if you're doing it manually, maybe you type out the angry version of what you want to say, delete, 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 and then use this format. So we talked about dealing with miscommunications. We talked about being consistent in your messaging. We talked about how you segment your audience so that you can track where they are in your pipeline. We talked about having all-in-one platforms that allow you to take information in one portion of your communication system and track it against the individual who's in your sales pipeline and correlate it with something that's happening in another part of your messaging system. And we talked about responding to both positive and negative reviews. And here's the life lesson. Most companies are pretty good at what they do, but they're not world. There's a reason that world class is a category. And you don't have to beat the best global company at whatever you do to win in your local niche market. Because in your market segment, yes, that company might be the big dog, but they're an out-of-towner. And you can come in with the local face. Say, I'm your local neighbor. You can say, I'm engaged with our community, and as long as you're consistent in your presence, you show up, you engage with your community, you can win over those big dogs. And most small businesses are struggling because they're not doing these five things, and therefore you don't have to be very good at most of them to do better than your direct competitors, discounting the global enterprise level organizations. So my friend Bridget Willard of bridgetwillard.com says, be social on social. Be there. Pick a platform or two and be present. I said Google is the big dog in the search space. When people are looking for a service, they're going to depend on Google's information, even if they're filtering it through a Firefox or a DuckDuck or a Bing. So each of the social media platforms, I'm going to name the big ones for the purpose of demonstration, have a different culture. So LinkedIn has a culture that's different than Facebook, which has a different culture than Instagram, which has a different culture than TikTok, which has a different culture than X, what old people like me know as Twitter. And the amount of engagement you need to do on each of those platforms and the types of messaging you would need to do on each of those platforms is different. And I can have I'm not positioned as a social media marketing agency. It isn't that's my expertise. And so that's a different conversation. But for purposes of automation, the point is automating onto one of these other platforms, the same tempo that you would do on X is going to get you negative social capital very quickly. So don't act on Facebook or LinkedIn like you would on Twitter, now known as X. And then Google Business Profile. Google Business Profile has a function called the update. And if you're posting a couple times a week or every day on LinkedIn, and you were to use that same tempo on your Google Business Profile, that would be excessive. That would be too much. The rule of thumb is every 7 days. So my clients who I'm just doing services for, my implementation is I try every 6 to 8 days. So I'll post something on a social, and of the things that I post on a social, one of those each week will go on to the Google Business Profile. Or if I'm not doing it for them, if I'm doing a training mode like I'm doing with you here, I'll say, this is the tempo. You're going to post 3 to 4 a week on LinkedIn and on Facebook. And of those, one of them is going to go on as a Google Business Profile. But more importantly, you're posting content, but don't just post it and set it and forget it. People will see that. They'll see it as advertising. They will see it as spamming their feed, and that will detract from your social capital. Engage with people, have conversations in public about what they're interested in. That will build your social capital. Be social on social. And this is a event for a local business community called Bamboo to Business, hosted by Chun Lee, Jessica Young, and Elizabeth Benavides. And so thank you, ladies, for the opportunity to have this conversation with your audience. I do all of this automation things. I bring the technology to the table to help you as a small business owner automate these processes. So the process is what you're doing and how you're doing it. The automation is what you're doing and what you're trying to accomplish. The automation is how you're doing it. That's different than manually typing Thank you to every single review. I think for a living. I used to think on behalf of generals. Now I think on behalf of local small business owners. And I drink coffee. This happens to be tea. I'm Keith. I'm the bald guy. I help small businesses with marketing, theory, tactics, training, techniques, and technology.